I'm not sure if I'm the right person to be airing that grievance to.
I'll just post it right here.
Yeah, I'd say make it a new message.
Like that?
Yeah.
There you go.
Alright.
Now let's...
Cool, now we can all go.
Okay, no, don't want to close that one. I've done this a couple times where I've been like recording something or like at a meetup and I close the wrong one.
Oh yeah.
And it stops the stream. I was just like, why?
Need anything? Drink? Anything?
Do you have, can I get a LaCroix?
Yeah.
Something fizzy?
Jump on. The LaCroix? They're LaCroix? Oh yeah, there's some LaCroix.
Oh, I'll take one of those, yeah.
You need Justin?
No,
We're good.
no, we figured out. We're engineers.
We're problem
We
solvers.
engineered.
Yeah. I can just keep handing you drinks while over.
I mean, that would get our intermission, right?
That's right. That's right. A horse snack. Only the world for
Justin, how long should I be going for?
How would you go? I would say
An hour is what I originally planned these for.
Yeah. I would say probably most of the time we do like try to do 45 minutes
Okay.
and then 15 questions.
That sounds perfect.
I would say set the tone as you start. Some people don't want to be interrupted and want questions at the end.
Yeah.
Some people are like, let's make this a conversation.
Okay.
So that's all.
I'm gonna fire the espresso machine back up.
Kinda?
Wait, are those pod covers? Do they block out the desk?
Yeah.
That is
You
ingenious.
roll around in circles and you can like block yourself in.
That is ingenious.
Isn't that cool?
Space, we call them space pods.
Yeah. We have like we just have a bunch of like those tables, but no divider in the middle.
Oh.
It's impossible to get any work done. Yeah, we don't even have monitors in our office for whatever reason.
Really? So everyone's just working off their laptop?
Yeah, because we're consultants apparently. I don't know.
It's open concept. It's a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah, most of us don't go into our office to get work done, which is hard. But...
Like, I can go work from Starbucks where it's quiet. So we'll do a couple of announcements.
Okay.
I usually do, especially since we have a small group, I usually like to everyone kind of introduce themselves.
Yeah.
And with it being New Year, I thought I might ask the question. Usually it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And or what's your interest in accessibility, but I thought, what's something you want to see out of accessibility in 2020?
Oh, yeah.
So we'll just pose that kind of a general
Yeah.
thing. And
Oh, that sounds good.
I'll turn it over to you.
Chris, did you get a new walking stick? I don't know what to call them.
Probably.
Because your last one didn't collapse, did it?
I remember.
Do you just wake up in the morning and kind of like reach around until you find one? It's like, that's the one I used today?
No, there's a whole pile of them by his door. Hey, did you ever get the one back that you like drop down a drain?
Oh yeah, the one in the giant in the conference room with the giant hole. I did.
That's like me in glasses back when before I got LASIK. I just reach and be like, that feels like a pair of glasses. That's good enough.
You hear them fall, and you're like,
Oh,
You're over here.
yeah. Especially like if it's in the bathroom or something and I knock it and I'm just like, damn it.
Yeah, that's why I started doing contacts.
I can't look at a screen and wear contacts. Like they dry out too quickly for me. So I got lasers instead.
Yeah, I mean, if I could, I totally would.
Yeah, are you outside the range?
Well, no, it's just like the issues with my optic nerve. So,
Ah.
like, even you zap my eyeball with a laser, it's not gonna do anything.
So I was nearsighted, astigmatism, and I have optic nerve. Well, yeah, part optic nerve issues, and I was just like, well, at least I can fix the glasses part.
Back here too, Justin. There's a couple seats back full of tall ones back here too.
I like doing the work.
Welcome everyone. Denver Accessibility Meetup. Thanks for coming out tonight. This is our first one of the new year. Oh yes. Got it. So tonight we're going to be talking about making accessibility more accessible, and really interesting conversation, especially with a lot of the things going on, legal-wise, changes in guidelines that are coming out, and then just general misconceptions about what accessibility is and isn't. Before we get started, a couple of things we usually like to do, a couple of announcements. Got a couple of gigs if everyone's looking for an accessibility job. Read it. CVS and Aetna are hiring for accessibility consultants. Anyone here work for CVS or Aetna? No?
You can.
You can. They're looking for more of the accessibility engineering role than the accessibility tester roles. So if you've got some development skills and you're doing accessibility, really great place to work. At least my friend Eliana says so. And she's pretty fickle about where she works. So if she says it's a good place to work, then it's got to be a good place to work. So if you're interested in that, let me know and I can get you her information and get you in touch with her. Next month, we're going to have John Sweet from Charter talking about, I just lost the topic, design systems, accessibility and design systems. So that'll be a really interesting topic as well. And hopefully, now that Ricky is here and showing me how to stream this stuff, we'll either looking to record or at least hopefully stream, maybe at least record future presentations as well. And those will be listed up on the site. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this kind of turns out, what software you're using, that sort of stuff. So look for that coming up next month as well. Finally, since we are kind of a small, close-knit little group, one of the things I like to do is just kind of have everyone introduce themselves. And then typically we kind of do like the what's your like Twitter bio sort of thing, like how you're involved with accessibility. But given that it's January, it's New Year, New You sort of thing, let's focus that on accessibility. What is something that you hope to see in accessibility, whether it's something in your career or something maybe just general accessibility as a whole that you'd like to see happen in 2020? So I will start. My name is Justin Stockton. I'm with the Paciolo Group, and I run this meetup and the Boulder meetup as well, accessibility meetups. For 2020, one of the things that I'm really interested in seeing more of is more frameworks getting accessibility support built in upstream, so that your bootstraps, your Beautifies, your all those different frameworks have those things built in so that developers who don't know a whole lot about accessibility can just kind of drop in components and have those. That's what I'm looking for. Ricky, you want to go next?
So I guess introduction on what I want for 2020.
Sure.
So, Ricky, I work for Slalom. Actually, funny story, my start in accessibility was with John Sweet at Charter when we sat in a room going, why the hell does none of this work and why are we being sued by California? So, funny background story. What I want to see in 2020 is I would love for us to get past the discussion topic of maybe we should put labels on buttons. Can we please get to like beyond that and bettering the experience for people who aren't sighted or who access websites via different ways, and not just kind of getting to that bare minimum that we've been doing for the past couple of years?
Cool.
Hey, I'm Ryan. I'm a software engineer at Committable, and I am here to learn about accessibility and how I can use it practically in my day-to-day. It's obviously a very important topic, so I want to learn more about it.
My name's Kyle. I know Ricky from also working at Charter under John Sweet. And I think for 2020, I think most people from the design side don't necessarily understand the correlation between like UX and accessibility. And so I'm hoping moving forward, like we can kind of make that relationship more known. Like good UX lends itself to better accessibility.
Hi, my name's Christoph. I'm a TypeScript hacker and accessibility engineer at Charter. 2020, I'd really like to see the fall of the traditional screen reader and a little bit more focus on stuff like end-to-end AI models and stuff like that.
Hi, Chris.
My name is Valerie Christinas. I'm a software engineer consultant, and as far as accessibility, I am working through the DQ courses presently, and I'm really wanting to apply more accessibility into what I code.
Fonda, I'm the UX team at Guild Education. We are all coming from the same team at Guild Education. We actually, I think, do a pretty good job there at, accessible design.
You do,
but, like,
actually.
we're doing,
Yeah.
trying to shift the focus to that for design instead of just throughout everything we're creating. And I guess my goal is just like small shifts, just move the needle, whenever possible. Natalie at Guild Education, like Fonda said, I'm a designer there. And yeah, we are working a lot on our design system, so next meeting sounds like it will be relevant. I'm also in 2020 really wanting to apply like the values of accessibility to like inclusion more broadly at my company and thinking about other ways to kind of spread those values on other teams.
I'm Danielle, I'm from Guild also. My, I guess, goal would be kind of like yours, where designers taking on more of a role and become more accountable for whether it's color contrast or the big pieces or making sure that it's a good UX as well.
My name is Nick. I'm a UX UI designer. I guess in general, I would like to see more designers erring less towards the side of aesthetics and the side of what actually helps people accomplish what their goals are.
Hi, I'm Becca Williams. I'm an independent Scrum Master and business analyst. I'm not currently working in this space. I'm looking to learn more and understand why I thought more this hasn't been a core part of the process of all the projects I've been on in the last several years.
Hey, I'm Martin. I just finished a software development bootcamp at Fine Art School. And I'm curious about accessibility. The company I was at prior to that bootcamp actually got sued.
You got it just in time.
That's a story.
I'm Jimmy, developer at a medical device company and just general interest in accessibility.
My name is Nawad Hadidia. I'm an accessibility architect at Charter Communications.
Maria, that's fine.
Scott Tate, I'm one of the owners of Blind Spots. We've been in this space now for 7 to 10 years or so. Various accessibility projects for a lot of big companies. In fact, we're starting, we'll see it behind me, we're actually starting in on re-engineering the US Olympic Committee app starting this week. So we'll be doing the Team USA app over the next 3 or 4 months before the Japan Olympics. Not the app that you really kind of use when you go to the Olympics, but the app that the athletes use to see a lot of their check-ins, all that kind of stuff. But I'm also a portal site author. I do a lot of teaching and training. I'd like to actually see, what I would like to see more of is I'd like to see more resources and tools available to web developers and designers and just the general people who, somebody's going to set up a little 5-page mom and pop shop website for their boutique, and they don't know anything about accessibility. They don't know that they have to be responsible. They just get sued and then they freak out, right? Which with good reason. So I like to see more resources available and pushed.
Hey guys, Stephen, engineer here also. I think maybe what Rick is going to talk about is from looking at his title, but really the title of what we did in last month's meetup, which was less regulatory accessibility and more practical accessibility. It's the checkbox to say that you're compliant. It's just doesn't make it usable. So maybe they can do some things on top of it.
Rick, I work here at BlindSpot as well. We're in a lot of engagements these days on successful projects, so I'm here to try to stay on top of it best I can, best. And stuff that I'd like to see this upcoming year is the continued increased awareness of accessibility. Making, hopefully people are more proactive and aware of it as opposed to reactive based on lawsuits or whatever.
It's gonna be a good year. All that stuff comes out. Hey, maybe it'll be a good decade. All right, two final announcements. One is, so afterwards, if anyone's interested, usually we'll go down to Denver Beer, grab a beer, just kind of hang out, continue talking. We can also talk here for a little bit, but if we want to go down to Denver Beer, first round's on me, so please come and join us for that, if that's something that you're interested in. Finally, and I've got to write notes down and put all this stuff down, but I want to thank BlindSpot, Scott, Stephen, Tate, for hosting this meetup. Do y'all have any announcements, anything that you want to say about BlindSpot? Or
No, just I mean that we're starting the U.S. Olympic Committee app. That's fun. So
that is cool.
So we were going to literally put a countdown on, put it on the refrigerator, the countdown to the Olympics, because that's our timeline.
Oh, that's the hardest timeline that you could probably have.
Olympics coming up.
Now, and
If
without
you guys don't know, the USOC, they're all down in Colorado Springs. Pretty much everything Olympics kind of comes out of Colorado Springs. We're actually heading down on Friday and kicking off the project and everything, just super fun stuff.
Curious, is that app going to be used by the Paralympic team as well?
Yes, absolutely. What they've done is it's not the USOC anymore, it's the USOPC. They basically have literally merged them together. So it's the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee now.
That's awesome. Cool. Any other announcements? Questions before we get started? Awesome.
Still tons of food up
Yep,
there.
there's food. Anyone need a drink?
Who wants snacks before we start?
We've got Diet Coke, Diet Root Beer.
If we don't eat it, it sits in the refrigerator all weekend.
Soda water, boys.
Okay. Shall we?
Take it away.
Okay, so first things first, that QR code will take you to these slides because I swear every presenter says that they're going to post the slides and it never happens. But unfortunately, answering the question earlier, this is more about the regulatory side, but it does cover some of the engineering side. Raise your hand who's on the engineering side here. Okay, who's on the design side? And then we have some, I would say, product Scrum Master. Okay. Awesome. We're going to cover some high-level context, and then we're going to get into some of the engineering stuff. And there's a section after that about the design stuff, which hasn't been fleshed out, but I can speak to it, just to kind of give you the layout of how I'd like this discussion to go. And I would like this to be more of a discussion than just me speaking, so if you have questions, bring it up. I like being interrupted in the middle, because it gives me a chance to stop and then remember to speak slower. So if you notice me starting to speak faster and faster, please do stop me. So one of the funny things was, I believe you mentioned earlier that many companies kind of approach accessibility as a oh shit moment. That's how I got into it. And I would like to kind of just spread the information and spread the knowledge to see if we can get away from that, as probably we all want. So starting off, how did we get here from a legal perspective? And it started in 1973. Well, taking a step back, how many people here know the historical context? Okay, so some. So I'll cover this, not in too much detail, but we'll go through here. It started in 73. Basically, there was a Section 504, which kind of it basically said that anything that got federal money needed to be accessible. And at this point in time, this was pre-internet, right? This was more like physical facilities, post offices needed to be able to be wheelchair accessible, so forth.
And kind of speeding forward a little bit, like we got to 86, which is when Section 508 came out. That was more about IT stuff, about like if you have a DMV form or DM entry system, like everybody has to be able to do it. And then fast forwarding a little bit more, we got into the 1990s, which is where the American Disability Act came about. And you'll hear this a lot, ADA Title II, ADA Title III. They come up a lot. This is when it kind of took those protections from 504 and kind of brought them down into the state level, brought them into the kind of local education system and so forth. And it also brought about this concept of a public space, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Past that, we have the IDEA, 1990s, which is the public education. This is elementary school and so forth. It's the whole, in elementary school, you need to have textbooks that everybody can read and consume. Sounds like a great idea to keep everybody on the same page, right? And then kind of fast forwarding to recent times and why accessibility on the web has become kind of a big topic is, I would say, 2017, there was a case with a series of stores where we kind of had a long discussion. The state of Florida, Supreme Court of Florida had a long discussion about what it means to meet the requirements of kind of having the web be accessible. Is the web a public space? So forth. And that's when WCAG, the Web Consortium Accessibility Guidelines, was kind of adopted as the standard. And that is kind of one of the first, I would say, relatively present case that kind of enforced what you needed to do to kind of meet the guidelines of 508, which is also why you hear 508 a lot in terms of when companies, so I work for consulting. Companies come to us, it's like, yeah, we want this built, but it has to be 508 compliant. That's what they're talking about. Artfully, a lot of the time they don't actually know what they're asking for, but it's this idea that the 508 includes public spaces. And via a series of recent lawsuits, such as Domino's, we're kind of getting to the point where we all agree that websites are public spaces. The original congressman who wrote who was a co-author of Section 508, actually intended this to be the case. So it's just kind of like, he's taking a bit of time and a bit of legalese to get to a point where we're finally agreeing with the original author about what this was supposed to cover. And yeah, for anybody who has not been keeping up with recent times, Domino's was sued. They argued that the website is not public space. It does not need to meet requirements. And they lost, again. They actually tried, I believe, 3 times. At this point, there's a question of whether it would have been cheaper for them just to do it, but Domino's, they got money, they can do what they want. But digging into ADA really quick. Oftentimes, within the context of accessibility, you'll hear talk about Title II or III. Title II is kind of everything that is related to government, states, programs, all that stuff. Title III is why I would say more and more companies are being aware of it. It covers, places of public accommodations. I like to use the term public spaces. And that is what kind of encompasses places like Domino's and such. It's why it's kind of reaching out to all the other websites, all the apps and so forth that classically many people have thought were not covered. Oh, hey, I have a slide on public spaces. Tony was one of the authors of, ADA. And the idea was that public spaces would cover basically any way that we communicate with each other, any way that makes life more efficient, so forth. So that's pretty cool that we're finally getting there after how many years are we going on now? 30 years? It only took 30 years and like a couple hundred lawsuits, a couple thousand lawsuits. I'm going to go into WCAG, but before that, any questions about timeline and kind of history of why we're where we are? Yes, Chris.
Do you think it's important to point out the really key citing factor in Domino's case was more that there were coupons available on the web that were not available otherwise? And that's really the piece that pushed it into this public space. And it really should differentiate between your website that you put up to share pictures of your cat
Yeah.
It can't be like that.
That's a really good point, right? It covers kind of that realm of if you can do it on the web, and I think this is actually the second time Domino's has been sued, because they had a pizza maker and pizza tracker before they also got sued. But it's kind of this idea that if you're gonna offer some ability for users to do on your website that is exclusive to it, you need to, well, make it so that everybody can use it, or you need to offer an alternative method. Actually, any other interesting tidbits from that case? It's been kind of a while since I've read it. Nope? Okay. So WCAG. So 2017, the Florida case against, what was it? Something store that we don't have here, Winn-Dixie stores. I don't actually know what kind of stores those are. I think they're, are they?
If you're from the South, you've been to a Winn-Dixie. Yeah.
I was wondering if that name was like some umbrella company. I've never been to one. But one of the outcomes of that case is this kind of, it's kind of setting the standards, the industry standards is the words used within the case itself, that WCAG is the guidelines that you should follow. Specifically, the AA standards. So in the WCAG, for those who have not, how many people have had to read that WCAG documentation day in, day out? Isn't it fun? It's actually fairly well organized. But for those who have not, they have 3 different levels. A, which is like, oh boy, I can use a screen reader on it. AA, which is like, oh boy, I can use different kinds of technology to interact with the website and it makes sense. To AAA, which is like full captioning on all videos. I'm blanking on the rest of the requirements. But AAA is kind of like the level that most places don't have the resources to spend to do. The exception to the AAA case is actually an interesting case out of UC Berkeley, where there is free course videos being posted by UC Berkeley, and because they were a publicly funded university, needed to meet AAA requirements, which meant that all videos had to be captioned. The unfortunate byproduct of this was that instead of them figuring out what the middle ground and how to progress towards it, they just took it all down. So not the greatest process there, but that's just to give you an idea of kind of like the different levels. And WCAG is actually well organized into 3 categories, which is really, can you see it via whatever technology you're using? Can you interact with it? Does it make sense? And robust is kind of this like, does it have all the context needed for all your assistive technology? So the 4 categories are fairly well structured and easy to read. There just happens to be, quick, anybody know how many rules are there in there? How many guidelines are there? Yeah, let's say for AAA. I actually don't know.
68. It's 48 for AA.
Okay. Right, so there are, that is awesome that you know that. I've always thought that I should go figure out that number, but never did. but right, like it's both a lot of rules and not all that many rules. Like honestly, a lot of board games have 48 rules in them. Like you can, like it's not unreasonable to have an idea of what's going on there. And if you ever need to, oh, is this going to work? The quick reference WCAG is actually pretty well organized, and you can filter on everything we're talking about, which is like the different levels, the different technologies. I love that flash and silver lights on here still. Oh. Sorry, everybody, I hit the wrong tab. I hit, really? What's the key to on full screen? Is it F10? F11? Nope. Next guess. View. Oh, it's Command Shift F apparently now. I am on a Mac. I'm on a Mac typing into Dvorak, so none of my keys even line up. Okay. I know why we care in this room, but oftentimes in my consulting life, I run into businesses asking why they should care. And like, I understand in a way because it's this big unknown thing. It's like, why should we care? Actually, before I do this, why do some of your companies care?
Because they got sued over and over again.
Yeah. So funny story. Me and Chris were actually on the same engineering team at Charter for a while, trying to get Charter to be unsued. That was a fun time. Other companies? Other places? Doesn't have to be your company. That happens a lot. Actually, yeah, the numbers are, I have the numbers in here somewhere, actually.
It's been increasing steadily. I think it's automated product, kind of like they do with the
Yeah.
lawsuits, accessibility problems.
Yeah, it was about 2,300 in 2018, and it's about tripling every year. So what, we're at 6,000 this year, 18,000 next year. Yeah. Any other reasons? Yeah. So kind of business value, yeah. Broader audience, yep. Goodwill, yeah, that's a big one too. Let's go into this. One of them is market opportunity, right? Like we talked about how 504 and 508, basically, well, 508 largely for us since we're in the tech space, has, and ADA has requirements for entering public markets, AKA universities, defense work, government work, Fed work, et cetera, et cetera. Just, I was doing this at a point when a client was trying to figure out if they could enter the University of California system in terms of meeting requirements. And I was looking, the University of California has a operating budget of $50 billion per year. And dividing that down, they spend, I believe it's 20-something% of that budget on IT resources. So that's a potential, what, like, let's guesstimate $10 billion market that you are basically by default excluded from if you don't even consider any of this stuff.
I think another example is if you introduce people to a blind person, I might end up thinking about probably guess what kind of phone they have. And because Apple has put so much focus onto competent, well-executed accessibility.
Yes. And Chris has just, that was a great segue into, or lead into the second good reason is captive audience. This is one of the things that always boggles my mind is high level, most companies know that word of mouth recommendation is the best recommendation that you can ever get. So why would you not try to, regardless of whether it's the right thing or not, get a captive audience? Because as Chris says, like, I'm trying to think, I feel like you're right. Like every person who's blind or let's say heavily vision impaired is on an iPhone. Like I don't think there is a single person I know who is not. They have a captive audience. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 adults have some kind of disability. Granted, this is inclusive of physical disabilities and impairments, but that is about 61 million people. And that number is only growing because we have our population curve has more people getting older. So why not get that captive audience? Especially because being frank, that aging population probably has more money than all us youngins. The other one is just aligning company values, right? We have a token or we trademark word. It may be trademark, I don't freaking know anymore. But we call it be customer obsessed, which is do it because it's the right thing for your customers. And one of the surprising things is Bernie Sanders' website, whether you're political or not, they made an announcement September 21st of 2019 following reports that none of the 2020 presidential candidates' websites were accessible. Our team began a wholesale audit and redesign of BernieSanders.com. That is, I mean, to be in a space where you are the only website that is accessible, that everybody in your voting base can get to, that actually meets the needs of your voting base is pretty profound. Do you know who? I know some have. I don't know if they are.
Warren has, I know.
Andrew Yang was hiring somebody to do it.
Was hiring somebody. There's actually a really interesting podcast, the 2020 election Iowa, and I think it was the September 20th episode, he delved into all of the accessibility issues behind all of them and talked to a couple of people who deal with accessibility in different corporations and kind of got the inside scoop of what accessibility, because it was new to him too. That's a really, if you want to find out more about it, it's a really interesting.
Could you post that in the comments of the meetup? Awesome, because I'd be super interested too. And the final one is lawsuits. Everybody's getting sued. We talked about this. We're looking at, was it 18,000 lawsuits this coming year? So from a business perspective, yeah, don't get sued. That's probably a bad business decision. Okay, and then this is the side that I like. I'm more interested in, it's more future facing. It is the why should we care as people, as technologists, and so forth. The most obvious one is, how many people here ski, or snowboard, or ride a bike, or a skateboard, or something that can break your collarbone? Who has broken a collarbone on their dominant side? It is horrible when you can't use your mouse with your dominant hand. I'm sorry, Chris. But, right? So just from a personal perspective, like it'd be great if all the buttons from a UX perspective on the site was big enough where my non-dominant hand could actually click on it. Other things is as technology gets more and more integrated, wearables, like Garmin Watch. Who has a smartwatch? Who has a smartwatch that interacts with their phone with an app that doesn't actually let you dismiss it properly? Yeah, right, and kind of some of the things I'm looking forward to is when we get to the point where augmented reality is a daily thing. Like, have we, in the future, will we pull out our phone or will some kind of, I don't know, optic nerve implant, whatever, glasses, whatever, pop up a display? Wouldn't it be great if we had built our app or our website in such a way where those kind of technologies could feed into it directly? Well, one of the interesting things is in the act of making things more accessible, we're making things more standardized. We're making things more computer understandable. And those are exactly the same kind of things and foundation that's needed to make things work with new technologies. AKA, that's why WCAG goes with the term accessive technology instead of just screen readers. And that kind of goes back to, I believe, Chris's point about like, wouldn't it be cool if we got away from just screen readers? And from a human perspective, like the web is kind of the great equalizer, and it'd be great if everybody could have access to it. But oh yeah, here's what it is, the future. Some random combination of 2 to 3 letters, and it referring to future technology that interfaces with the web in a different way. BCI, right? Like Elon Musk just invested how much money in a new brain computer interface company? Okay, so that covers context and history. Any questions about that? Yay! I don't know if that means I did a good job or a poor job. Who knows? Well, let's go to part 2. This is what I call the dumpster fire. This is what I deal with often as a consultant. Honestly, this is probably what most of you will deal with if you join a company who is like, oh shit, we need a team of accessibility engineers. And it is the, hey, can you make it accessible? Question mark, question mark. Profit. I swear this is how 90-something% of accessibility work gets done. It's this kind of reactive approach. It's a company realize that they're missing a market, they can't sell to a certain audience, they're being sued, so forth. And that's what I call kind of the dumpster fire. And in this world, we kind of have 2 strategies at play. And this is from kind of a business perspective of there is what I call remediation, which is based on a time restraint. And there's a refinement strategy, which is based on an outcome restraint. Remediation is, as I was saying, 90% of the cases. It is the lawsuit, market requirement, et cetera, et cetera. It is we have a deadline, or the company has a deadline, and it needs to be met somehow. There's the other side, which is more along the side of guild education, I think, which is company values. We want everybody to get access to it. And that is more on customer obsessed, or basically user value outcome based. And this is based on having high impact changes instead of checking as many boxes as you can so that you don't get sued. And kind of going through these remediation, right? You're effectively trading quality and user experience for pure percentage. Because in a lot of situations when you are trying to get into the market or you're being sued, you need to show quote unquote good faith that you're making quote unquote best effort. And numbers are really easy to measure. It's kind of a crummy situation, but it is the reality when you get brought in to kind of solve these problems. I'm seeing you nod. Is this kind of the world you live in?
I work for a company that does these.
Oh yeah, you do. You actually did the audit that I was helping fix at one point.
That unfortunately incentivizes though for like overly picky initial audit reports.
Yeah. So, right, really if you're in this world, and right, like generally we don't get to pick the strategy. Generally we end up in the strategy. It's to understand the game that you're in so that you can make the needed impact to get to the point when you can actually do what I would call more meaningful work or more impactful work. But this is the reality for many situations. There's the other side, which I call refinement because I like alliterations, and these both start with R. I would say refinement is where we want to be, where most of us want to be, which is we want high user experience. We want the quality, if you will, in our products so that when somebody gets it, they're like, wow, that is the best experience I've ever had. One example is there's a shopping app, I believe, out of England. And they didn't set out to be the most accessible app. That was just something that they were aware of. And they got such glowing, like their reviews came back, and people largely blind who were using screen readers on the phone were like, this is the best shopping experience I've ever had. And that blew up, it spiraled kind of out of control in a positive way. And that's kind of the refinement side of things. Okay, we're gonna go into defects, which is largely how most of us probably work because we are either in Jira, Rally, or Pivotal, or one of these things, right? Like basically, as an engineer, our lives are largely driven by defects. So the question is, what is a defect in this world? For better or for worse, a lot of the time, it is all about the screen reader. For remediation work, it is generally that with a screen reader, generally speaking, JAWS or, Chris, help me out, NVDA, cannot make logical sense or interact with the proper thing on your website.
Well, the reason I think we focus on it is because it's a deterministic problem. It has a defined outcome.
Yeah.
We want this particular interaction to work in this particular way,
Yeah.
which is easy to communicate to the engineer.
Yep, and then once you do it, you check the box, your defect gets closed, your percentage goes down, everybody is seemingly happy. This doesn't solve the user experience though. Honest in this world, there's tool detectable stuff and there's non-tool detectable stuff. Tool detectable stuff, there's various auditing tools out there. Chrome actually has it built into Lighthouse now. They will do things like, hey, does your button have labels? Hey, do your headings make logical order? And this is kind of like your, if you will, this is kind of like your 20% mark. If you do all this, at the very least, you can roughly navigate your page. It doesn't guarantee it makes sense or anything, which leads into kind of the second part of defects, which is human detectable defects. This is the more, I would say, more meaningful stuff. This is does the page go in a logical order? are there meaningful labels everywhere? Basically, if you have a giant form, can you reasonably make sense of this form without all these random visual cues that many places like to put in? Does the flow make sense? Sometimes, for whatever reason, people like to use CSS to move things around for no logical reason. And then you'll do something like, hey, can you please put your first name? Then can you please put your gender? And then can you please put your last name? Right? And actually, whenever this happens, I like to pull up our own page at SLOM because we are guilty of this too. It's also a good opportunity to show off a tool, assuming it worked, unless it's been fixed. This is one of the tools I use. It's for Chrome. It's Accessibility Insights for Web. They do some fast auditing stuff. But one of the things that boggles my mind still is that many websites don't have, oh, there you go. Don't have tabs going in the right order. In this case, and we'll go over into the engineering solution for this in a bit, is you can get to a bunch of hidden things, visually hidden things that really should not, nobody should be able to get to, but they were never hidden. So in this case, you would go through, how many is that? You go through 11 options that you're not supposed to be able to get to before you can actually get to content down below. But cool tools out there, and hopefully, if I do enough of these presentations, my company will actually work on the site and make the accessibility and the user experience a bit better. Okay.
You can sue your company.
Right?
I have a question. This might be a topic for another time, but are there any places where web accessibility and data privacy are in conflict?
Ooh. I don't think so.
Security, yes. Data privacy, I haven't tackled that.
Yeah, I know CCPA is coming about, which may lead into some of these things. But to my knowledge, privacy and...
I kind of have an example for that.
Oh.
So when I was in charter, we actually had a special building code that was specifically for people who identified as visually impaired. And that was kind of creating an issue with the CCPA.
Oh, interesting. Wait, why? Why do you need a? Okay, anyways.
Yeah. Couldn't fall under PII because it was identifying.
Yeah.
We have a weird use case for that one too. We do a lot of work in airports and airlines.
Yeah.
And we're doing a lot of work on kiosks in airports, and we're trying to kind of change the accessible experience from being a little bit less about navigating around with the keyboard and a little bit more about interacting with voice recognition and voice technologies. Where Ricky, where are you flying today? Oh, I'm flying to LAX, right?
Yeah.
And that was a situation where kind of data privacy and accessibility kind of get in the way of each other.
Oh.
Because you literally talking out loud and saying where you're going, what your name is, it's kind of a real world situation that we have to work through.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, anybody using it, like a kiosk in an airport is using headphones anyway, but for all intents and purposes, you're still speaking out loud.
Yeah, right, like you need to verify your identity or whatever.
Which is still, in my opinion, admittedly still a little bit stupid, because if I go up to the front, I'm telling the person where I'm going, I'm saying it out loud.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
that's as close as I can get.
that's it. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. Okay. But kind of the big takeaway I have from dumpster fires is it's always about progression instead of perfection. And as long as you can build that into your project or start laying the groundwork for that early on, what I've seen happen a lot of times is you'll knock out your first, let's say somebody has done an audit and given me a defect list, because this has literally actually happened. You knock off the first 25% really quickly. You show that you roughly know what you're doing, good faith, whatever. And then from there, you can start working on kind of the combination of problems that actually make the experience poor, and knocking those out in like collections and groups and workflows instead of just checkbox and percentage. So really about progression. And the other thing is some of the stuff even in these audits, I would say, like it's questionable which direction you should go. Like both are, it could be one of those situations where like both experiences are shitty or both experiences are good. And that's just about like, try it out. See with some analytics, like which flow is better. Do some user studies. Okay, actually getting into the web dev. We have engineers here, right? So part 3 is titled Gaishiro for web dev. Who knows what Gaishiro is? Yes, it is how to say get your shit done without actually cursing in the office. But we're kind of taking the principles from here, which is to focus on one thing at a time and make it so repeatable that it becomes boring. And hopefully at the end of it, then we can start working on kind of interesting novel problems, which is how do we make user experiences better? Okay, thought exercise. Can you make sense reading the raw HTML of your website? I know we have a lot of spas here, so assuming fully rendered. I don't know. Like if you were to pop up your dev tools and you're looking at the structure of your website as pure HTML doesn't make sense. Could you make sense of it? Okay. Part of why I like this exercise is for people who've never used a screen reader, they kind of look at your DOM structure and your HTML. That is how it makes sense of the website. So if you look at the HTML and you wrote it, and you go like, what the hell is going on? What hope does the screen reader, which has no context of what you're trying to do, make sense of it? So that's just lead in into ARIA. Who knows what ARIA is? Well, who knows what ARIA is without reading that? Yay! ARIA is a set of attributes that you can use for HTML that adds additional context to your DOM elements. And this context allows for assistive technology to kind of make sense of things that you would otherwise have a hard time making sense of. Prime examples of this is buttons with icons in it. That seems to be the hip new thing that everybody's doing. Buttons with icons within them that transition via fancy animations into a second icon. Well, from a pure HTML standpoint, unless you can guess what each icon is labeled or named as inside of your font file, it's hard. So that's an example of when ARIA comes into play. And it does stand for Accessible Rich Internet Application, which, yeah, I feel like this is actually a horrible page and I should have more on it. So I'm just going to go on. I am a firm believer of the 80-20 rule. Anybody not know what the 80-20 rule is? Awesome. So the easiest kind of big group, the 80%, which takes the 80% of problems with web dev in terms of accessibility that you can solve in 20% of the time, is please write semantic HTML. What we mean by that is keep it simple. Please keep your HTML simple. Please do not decide that because bolds or H4s are used nowhere else on the site, you're going to save a couple characters in your CSS to manipulate and move it around. Keep it simple, don't be fancy, and kind of keep it in a top-down order. In that, when I was on the Slom build website and I was showing the tab ordering roughly goes top to bottom. Roughly, screen readers go from element top to bottom. So if you keep things in kind of a logical ordering in your HTML to begin with, you will not run into this problem. If you do not, it is very painful to go back and fix. Actually, me and Chris spent 3 months trying to fix some of these things. Does everybody know what a carousel is, roughly? So if you don't build a carousel with your HTML elements and all your buttons and your icons and all those things in the right order, and you decide to use tab index to fix it, you should delete it because it is very, very hard to fix. So that's kind of the importance of why semantic ordering is.
Common when you see those in real world usage
Yes.
And that's a definite code smell.
Yes. So, big thing is don't do that. Use elements for what they are. 2, don't move things around magically with CSS. This will never end well. 3, do not use a tab index above 0. This is kind of a wonky thing, but when you get into it, basically, once you're above 0, you are now defining tab ordering manually, which will only lead to great pain in the future. Also, yes? Yeah. Yeah, that's not hidden.
But like the tab ordering could be correct if it offers a skip, because you would want to hit the navigation first versus.
Let's see.
Potentially without like actually diving into it, like that could be correct.
It's sort of the last thing should be already hidden until they're expanded.
Yeah.
Even though it's navigation, because like I thought navigation should be really one of those top level elements, and the issue is actually that the navigation's hidden.
The
But were it exposed, then the tab would go to the navigation.
You know, I'm actually split on that. I'm split on both sides, where like I could see the hamburger menu, like I could see the hamburger button being the only thing inside of the nav landmark to begin with, and then you do that, and then it pops it open. Yeah, I would probably, that's probably what I would lean towards, to have a similar experience for all users. That's why I would go towards it. But yes. Well, that's actually weird, because I thought they were up. But anyways, yeah, these should be already hidden.
Actually, there's an interesting thing with RA hidden that we'll get to pretty soon, too, dealing with mobiles.
Yeah, high level, don't do tab index above 0. Next thing, please use your headings in the proper order. Don't use them as a shortcut for typography changes. This seems to happen a lot with, actually, this happens on the Slum build side. They have caption text as an H4 because it was an unused element, so why not? And also prefer to like have an H1 on every page. I don't think this is actually a strict rule, but please try to. Is it a AAA? Okay. Other things, use landmark for what they're, what they actually are. I've seen people use navigation very willy-nilly everywhere, and it makes it very hard to navigate a page when you don't know where the actual primary navigation is. Also, please do not use these for styling. I know Chrome accepts it, and I think Firefox accepts it, but please don't. Okay, so that's high level. That's what you need to do to be 80%, or to get 80% of the way in terms of defects for accessibility, which goes back to kind of like, in my mind, it's kind of crazy that we can't write good HTML. Yes. So actually, that's a good point. Going back to, I had a page on tools. On there are things like Axe and whatever, and they actually do a fairly good job of pointing these things out. Like, they will point out when you have duplicate landmarks. They will totally point out if your headings are not in increasing order. They will point out the tab index. The semantic HTML is a bit harder, but it will point out a lot of things. Out of that remaining 20%, 80% of that is providing context for things that don't have enough context to interact with. And this is one of the things that I think UX can help with a lot, is oftentimes, I'll get to that later. But one of the primary things is labels. Input fields, form fields, have proper labels to actually describe what's going on. This is going to save you so much pain. There is an edge case of using off-screen text, which is when you want something that's not a label, but you need some kind of hidden text in there for specifically screen reader users. If you ever get to it, just pull up the slides, click that link, go there, copy and paste that CSS. But the large part of it is, in terms of providing additional context, most of the problems I see in this space has to deal with forms. It has to deal with the primary way most users interact with your website. And in this world, it is in using the correct ARIA labels, label bys, requires, etc. to provide the correct context. And you kind of have to do it a couple times to get a feel for this. But oftentimes, visually, you'll have labels and input fields, and they have no relations to each other. Visually, they'll be next to each other, but there's no relations. They could either be coupled together with the HTML tag, was it like form, something, something. They could be siblings. One of them could refer to the ID. But if none of those occur, here are the ARIA things to do for it. Going down, the other thing, and this is probably the thing that I see that bit Charter in the ass probably the hardest, is error messaging. No, don't tell me that. High level, you have, right, like from a user experience perspective, you have error messaging that comes up as you're typing something in. There's error messaging that happens when you leave a field. There's error messaging that happens when you try to submit a form. Accept and understand that all three of those need to be announced in the proper way, and they behave differently. In this case, for a per input, aka when I tap out or things that pop up immediately, you can use describe by and invalid to kind of mark it. There is this edge case where a lot of websites like to do these tooltips with all these fancy visual elements in them that tell you that your password needs to be or more than 20 characters long and must include an exclamation mark and a smiley face, right? Things like that can be kind of hard to get to work with describe by. This is where you can use live regions, which we'll cover later, to kind of announce that kind of stuff. I would still highly recommend you don't do a lot of that stuff because it's painful. The other thing is form level errors. Make sure when you finish submitting a form and you pop up an error, which is honestly probably like, when you're interacting with a form, at least for me, like I screw up 8 times before I get it on the 9th time. So if you think about it, that's like 80% of your user's experience is interacting with that error message. Make sure you actually jump to it and you focus on it and you take the user back to it so that they know what is wrong. But that's kind of the high-level form stuff. Oh, high decorations. Yeah, you were kind of.
Oh, I just want to point out 1A. This should be ARIA labeled by, not ARIA labeled by.
Dang it. Man, I should have you proofread my slides. Yeah. Damn. High decorations. This is another one. This is kind of a low lift, but this is the. If something doesn't have actual meaning and it's just pretty, and I see more and more of these with like, oh, let's put a little triangle on the top right of this card that's an icon, and it doesn't actually mean anything, it doesn't indicate anything, you can hide it. I saw you kind of, did you have a comment about that?
In that particular case, I would actually roll it with presentations that have already been
Oh.
Because rolling with presentation removes the semantics of the image element.
Oh, that's a good point.
From it, and ARIA hidden equals true means that it's only hidden from screen reader users or things that support ARIA hidden.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I am going to have you proofread these afterwards. Yeah. Okay. The other thing that happens, I feel like more and more, especially with SPAs, single-page apps, and component libraries, is, hey, let's make our own special widget that behaves in this way. So one of the things that ARIA provides is this glorious chart of roles. But with each role, there are certain contexts that screen readers and assistive technology will show you, such as if it is a role of toggle, is toggle in here? Switch? It will be like, it will tell you that it is a switch. You can go from A to B. It is currently on A. Progress bar will be like, we are at 10 of 100, whatever. But if you end up in a situation where you have your own front-end components that are div magic, please add the right roles, because otherwise interacting with it can be painful. And this chart looks kind of crazy, but it actually is, once you do a couple roles, it actually makes a lot of sense. It kind of shows you what each of them are and what attributes you can do on them. Wait, can I zoom? Is that something I can? Nope. But like reading off of here, there's one, row header has a special ARIA attribute for sort. Kind of useful if you're trying to interact with it in a non-kind of clicking manner. Okay. So that gets you, what, to 97%? The big chunk remaining from there is focus management. Please don't override :focus. Or if you are, like, figure out how you're going to do focus outlines correctly. I feel like this happens with more sites than I would expect, where you can't figure out where you are if you are a pure keyboard user. Either keep the native focus or have a custom solution. So if you're in Angular or React or wherever, they have libraries out there that will be like keyboard only focus. And then when you click on it with a mouse click, it won't highlight it. That is fine too, but don't just kind of like remove all focus and just leave it that way. Focus control. Remember how I was talking about form errors, and like a lot of forms have some kind of box on the top that lists like your forms have these following errors or whatever. You can get back to it by focusing on it. Well, this is jQuery, but with whatever way you're going to do it, get to the element, focus on it. This comes up a lot also with modals, if you are at a place that decides to make their own modal. Yeah, where are other situations that need manual focusing that I'm skipping? Hamburger menus is another one. Like when you collapse a hamburger menu, sometimes, especially with IE11, if you don't manually set focus, it will disappear and you can't get back to the page.
Single page apps when you're moving between views.
Oh, yeah, router loads. You're not actually loading the page. So a lot of assistive technology doesn't know that the page has been reloaded. So generally, this is where you focus on the H1. Ooh, where are other ones? Or have some kind of exposure where you can dictate that the page has effectively done a reload.
That might actually come when they do the AOS stuff. This is a object model, because you'll be able to actually indicate events that are happening.
Okay. That'll be nice. The flip side is situations where you do not want to set focus, but you want to keep people from getting to the rest of the page. This is a classic case of modals, dialogues, I guess, which are kind of the same things. Pop-ups, I don't know, where are the examples? But this was a gotcha for me because I implemented this at Charter for modals. And instead of the kind of the naive solution to this one is, hey, when you get to the end of your modal, just push them back to the top, right? The trick to this is actually to ARIA hide anything that the user should not be interacting with.
That'll get easier once other browsers support invert.
Yes. It's one of those, unless you have to support IE11, in which case I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't know if you can probably, well, we'll find out. We'll figure, we'll see. But so focus tracking, which is great, but this leads into one of the problems that you will have oftentimes in SPA, which is a component will need to request that some other component on the page is focused on. The naive solution to this is to pass a bunch of references to sibling components around, and then this becomes a nightmare. And in terms of convincing like a standard engineering team, they will never do it. So in terms of this, a lesson learned recommendation is to create a service or some kind of high-level thing that everybody has access to that will manage your focus state. If you want to use NGRX, yes, but a service somewhere, somehow, to manage your queue of focus. Another interesting thing that this can help solve is, especially with Angular, the change detection cycle can be kind of wonky. So what can happen is you will have like 3 or 4 focus actions all occurring during the same change cycle. So by having them all in the service with a priority, you can figure out which one should be instead of simultaneously trying to focus 4 things and end up focusing on none of them because all the elements disappeared and now you're lost. AKA, this happens a lot with search things that overlay the page because your elements kind of appear and disappear. Okay, yay, now we're at like 99%. That's like 99% of what I've done in this system. Live regions, mentioned this earlier. Special caveat is if you're working on a SPAL, the live region has to exist when the document is roughly done loading. If you try to insert it afterwards, the screen reader doesn't know that there's a live region and to watch the live region. A live region will announce anything that you put into it. This is how you kind of get around the I have a spinner. It needs to announce every 25% kind of thing. But just a gotcha for people working in SPALs. Put it in there early and often, and probably make a global service for it. If you're doing custom widgets, good luck. On a serious note, if you're doing custom widgets, there's a serious question about whether you should have it. The one exception case where I've seen this be we probably need a custom widget is geospatial stuff. Because there's really no ARIA widget role for a satellite zooming system or something like that. I swear there's a date picker. Is it not a date picker? Okay, date picker, that's a way better example of something that I'm sorry if you have to do. So kind of closing that. How many people are doing component library stuff? Actually making component library? Well, we can talk about that later. Okay. So that's the engineering side. Given those kind of topics, any questions about how UX feeds into it? Because I apparently never imported the slides for design, I'm sorry. Any questions? Yay, and roughly this is what I've screwed up for the past 3 years trying to learn this stuff. So hopefully you guys have a better, more enjoyable process. Yay, okay.